Welcome back to Grandma Betty's little kitchen, my dears. Take a look at this old photograph here. A dashing man, a young wife full of smiles, and a bouncing baby boy. It looks just like the perfect 1,970 seconds American dream, doesn't it? Back in Greenwood, everyone used to say I was the luckiest woman alive to have married Richard, a man everyone believed was a living saint. But you know, my dears, photographs are silent. They don't capture the heart-wrenching cries muffled behind a bathroom door locked tight every single night. They don't show the dark purple bruises on the tender skin of a newborn baby. I slept beside a monster wearing an angel's mask for years, completely unaware. Today, I'm going to tell you about the high price of blind trust and how a gentle mother was forced to become a detective to save her son's life from his own father. If you are listening from wherever you are in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, simply must be told. I'm Betty. I'm 73 years young, and today I live here in my simple little house in Indianapolis, Indiana. Life has taught me many things, some good, others I would have preferred not to learn, but they all made me who I am today. Every morning I get up and brew my coffee. You know, it's a ritual I've kept for over 50 years. I brew it fresh with a splash of cream and sugar. It can't be too sweet or too bitter. Then I prepare my cup with love, just like my grandmother Alice taught me. I sit on my porch, facing the garden I planted with my own hands, and watch the birds coming to visit the flowers. It's a moment of peace I conquered after many storms in my life. I started this routine when my grandkids were little. It was a way to create special moments when they came to visit. My oldest grandson, Mason, who is 17 today, loved getting up early with me to watch the sunrise while I made the coffee. And Harper, my granddaughter of 15, always wanted to learn how I did it, even though she was so small back then. They were like a light that illuminated my path when I thought I would live in the shadows forever. I was born in Greenwood, a town here near Indianapolis. It was 1952. The United States was living in a very different time. But back at home, things were always tough, regardless of what was happening in the rest of the country. My dad, Walter, worked as a mechanic. He had strong, calloused hands, but a heart soft as velvet. Now my mom, Dorothy, was a seamstress, and a good one. She made dresses that were breathtaking, especially for girls who were getting married. We were 4 siblings: me, the youngest, Patrick, the oldest, Gary, the middle one, and Frank, who came just before me. Our house was small, a wooden farmhouse, with a roof that always leaked when it rained hard. It had a hallway that cut the house in half, 3 small bedrooms, a living room that also served as a workshop for my dad, and a kitchen with a potbelly stove that warmed the whole house in the cold Indiana winters. The bathroom was out in the yard, an outhouse we were scared to go to at night. On the land, my mom kept a vegetable garden and some chickens, which helped put food on the table when money was tight. Life was simple, but it had its joys. Every Sunday we went to service at St. James Church, and afterwards, my dad would take us to get ice cream in the square when there was a little money left over. I loved Sundays for that, and also because it was the only day we could play without many chores. During the week, it was getting up with the roosters crow, drinking coffee and eating toast with apple butter that my mom made, and then helping with chores before going to school. I swept the porch, fed the chickens, and helped hang the clothes on the line. After school, I helped my mom with the simpler sewing. It was she who taught me to sew and knit, skills that give me so much comfort today. In school, I was diligent. I liked reading and writing, and always brought home books that my teacher, Mrs. Carroll, lent me to finish reading. My dad said I had a good head for studies, but back then, for a girl from a humble family, studying beyond high school was almost impossible. Still, I dreamed of being a teacher someday. Among my brothers, Frank was always the most determined. Since he was little, he had a serious character. He always said he was going to be a police officer when he grew up. He and Patrick were very close. They were always making plans. Gary was the quietest, always seemed to be thinking about something important. And I, as the baby, was kind of spoiled by everyone, especially my dad. The games of my childhood were simple: hopscotch, jump rope, playing hide and seek with the neighborhood kids. My best friend was Lucy, daughter of Mrs. Patricia, who lived 3 houses down from ours. We played with rag dolls and made mud pies in her backyard. But not everything was roses in my childhood. Poverty was a constant companion, and so were hardships. I remember once we spent almost a week eating only oatmeal because my dad got sick and couldn't work. And there was Uncle Jesse, my mom's brother, who came to visit us every now and then. He drank too much, and when he drank, he got a look that scared me. My dad didn't like it when he showed up, but my mom said it was her obligation to help her brother. It was on one of those visits from Uncle Jesse that I had my first encounter with real fear. I was about 8 years old. I was alone at home helping my mom prepare dinner when he arrived. My mom had to go out to buy something we were missing and asked me to keep stirring the stew on the stove. As soon as she left, Uncle Jesse came into the kitchen. He looked at me in a strange way, called me doll, and wanted me to sit on his lap. Something inside me said that wasn't right. Thank God. At that moment, Frank arrived from school. When he walked in, my uncle changed completely, went back to the living room, and pretended he was asleep. That night I told Frank what had happened. He was only 12, but he looked at me with the seriousness of a grown-up and said, "Don't worry, Betty. I'm going to protect you. No one is going to hurt you." And didn't he keep his word? The next day, I don't know what happened, but Uncle Jesse left very early and never showed up at the house again when I was alone. That was when a special connection was born between Frank and me. He became my protector, my hero. Whenever I had a problem, it was him I ran to. When the girls at school made fun of me for my patched clothes, it was him who comforted me and said that one day everything would be different. And when I was afraid of something, it was enough to think, Frank won't let this happen. As we grew up, Frank kept that promise to protect me. He studied hard, managed to get into the state police, and rose through the ranks over time, always serious, always upright, always fair. He became a man who commanded respect just by walking into a room, and I felt safe knowing I had a brother like that. Patrick followed the path of carpentry, learned the trade from a neighbor, and set up a small workshop. Gary went to work in a factory in Chicago and moved there. I continued helping my mom with sewing and embroidery, always dreaming of a different life but not knowing how to reach it. My mom started teaching me all the secrets of a good housewife, how to make pot roast that isn't dry, how to get tough stains out of clothes, and how to darn socks. "A woman has to know how to take care of the house and the family," she said. "It's our mission in this life." I learned everything well, but deep in my heart, I wanted something more. I wanted to study. I wanted to see the world beyond Greenwood. I wanted to be free like the birds I saw flying over the roof of our house. Little did I know that life still held many surprises for me, some sweet, others bitter as gall, and that promise of protection from my brother Frank would be so important many years later, in a moment when I would need it most. At 18, in 1970, I finally got a job at a fabric store in downtown Greenwood. It was my first step toward having a little independence. I didn't earn much, but it was enough to help at home and save a few dollars for myself. My mom didn't really like me working outside. She thought a single daughter should stay at home. But my dad supported me. "Let the girl breathe a little," he said. And so it was. At the store, I helped customers, organized fabrics, and sometimes even gave advice on which fabric was best for each type of clothing. The knowledge I learned with my mom helped me a lot. The owner of the store, Mrs. Helen, was a widow who treated me almost like a daughter. It was she who encouraged me to take a tailoring course to perfect what I already knew. It was working there that I met Richard. He came into the store late one afternoon wanting to buy fabric to make curtains. He said he had just moved into a small apartment and wanted to make the place cozier. At that moment, he seemed so different, a man worried about curtains. Most of the guys I knew didn't even know the color of the curtains in their own house. Richard was different in every way. He spoke softly, had polite manners, and a smile that seemed to light up the room. He always dressed very well, despite being a simple employee at the local bank. He came back to the store other times, always with some excuse to buy something, until one day he invited me for coffee after work. I remember our first date like it was yesterday. I was so nervous I spilled coffee on my new blouse. Instead of laughing at me, like other guys would have done, Richard took a handkerchief from his pocket and helped me clean it with such care so as not to embarrass me. That was when I fell completely in love. We started dating, always with much respect. Richard made a point of coming to the house. He talked with my dad about politics and football. He brought simple little gifts for my mom. Everyone liked him, except Frank. My brother, who was already an agent with the Indiana State Police at that time, looked at Richard with suspicion. "There's something about him that doesn't sit right with me, Betty," he told me once. "No one is that perfect." But I was in love and thought Frank was just being a jealous and overprotective brother. Oh, love. It doesn't just make us blind, my dears. It makes us deaf to the most sincere warnings. How I wish I had looked at Richard through Frank's eyes back then, even just for a moment. "You're always going to think no one is good enough for me," I replied, half playful and half annoyed. The courtship lasted 2 years. Richard treated me like a princess. He never raised his voice, never made a rough gesture, never pressured me for anything. When he asked for my hand in marriage, my dad didn't hesitate to give his blessing. The only condition he made was that we live nearby so I could keep helping my mom, who was already starting to suffer from health problems. Our wedding was simple but beautiful. I got married in a dress I sewed myself under my mom's supervision. The reception was in my parents' backyard, with BBQ made by my dad and Patrick. Frank attended, of course, but kept a serious expression the whole time. When he went to hug me, he whispered in my ear, "Anything happens, you know where to find me." At that moment, it seemed like an exaggeration. Richard was the gentlest man I had ever met. Everyone commented on how lucky I was. "He's never going to make you suffer," my mom said. "A man like that is 1 in 1,000, the neighbors commented. In the first months of marriage, we went to live in a rented cottage, not far from my parents' house, just as my dad had asked. Richard kept working at the bank and I at the fabric store. He didn't want me to work. He said he could support us alone, but I insisted. I liked my independence, however small. Our life was quiet. Richard never came home late. He didn't drink more than a beer on the weekend. He didn't gamble, gave me no reason to complain. When we went out together, he always made a point of introducing me to colleagues with pride. "This is my wife, Betty," he would say with a smile. The only thing that bothered me, even slightly, was how he changed when my brother Frank was present. Richard got tense, spoke even softer than usual, and seemed to measure every word. I attributed it to the fact that Frank was already feared by many people in town. As part of the state police, he had a reputation for being tough, for not letting anyone off the hook. It even made me laugh how nervous Richard got, interpreting it as wanting to make a good impression. At 24, after almost 4 years of marriage, I got pregnant. It was 1,976. An immense joy. Richard seemed like the happiest man in the world. He bought a crib before we knew the sex of the baby. He started saving money to buy our own house and wouldn't let me carry any grocery bags. "Now you have to take double care," he said. The pregnancy went well. I left the job at the store in the 7th month, when my belly was already quite big, and prepared to be a mom. My mom and my neighbors filled me with advice, and I absorbed it all, anxious and happy. Our son was born on a cold morning in July 1976. A strong boy with his dad's eyes and, according to my mom, the Miller family nose. We decided to call him Tyler, in honor of Richard's grandfather, of whom he always spoke with affection. It was after Tyler's birth that things began to change, although in such a subtle way that I took a while to notice. It is heartbreaking how the most dangerous red flags often look like simple quirks at first. Betty is about to dismiss these signs as new parent jitters. But pay close attention, because what looks like a helpful father is actually the first step of a terrifying trap. Richard insisted that since I was tired with the baby's care during the day, he would take charge of the evening bath. "It's my contribution," he said. "You already do so much during the day. Let me handle this moment." At first, I thought it was so sweet, a dad so present, so willing to help. It was rare back then. All my friends envied the husband I had. "Richard is a saint," they said. But after a few weeks, I started to notice something strange. The baths lasted a long time. At first, I thought it was because Richard was careful. He wanted to do everything right. But an hour, 2 hours, sometimes even more. It was a long time for a simple baby bath. When I asked why it took so long, he always had an explanation. Tyler was restless. I had to calm him down. "Oh, I took the chance to give him a massage. It's good for development." I accepted, of course. Richard was such a good dad, so attentive. Except, little by little, I noticed other changes. Tyler, who was a calm and smiling baby, started getting more irritable. He cried a lot, especially when his dad approached for the bath. At that moment, I thought it was colic or some developmental phase. All the moms told me it was normal. Babies go through stages, but looking back, I realize I was trying to convince myself more than anyone else. You see, when you love someone, when you've built your whole world around the idea that they are a good man, your mind refuses to see the cracks. I told myself I was being ungrateful. He works all day, I'd whisper to the mirror while washing my face. He's just trying to bond with the boy. I felt guilty for even having a bad feeling. I started to believe that maybe I was the problem, that I was too anxious, too hovering, that I was suffocating them. That's the most dangerous trap of all, my dears, when the shadow makes you doubt your own light. One night, while Richard was bathing Tyler, I got close to the bathroom door. It was locked as always. I pressed my ear against it and heard something that froze my blood. It wasn't the lullabies Richard claimed to sing to the baby. They were low groans that seemed to come from Richard and a muffled cry from Tyler as if he were in pain. I knocked on the door immediately. "Is everything okay in there?" I asked, my heart racing. The answer came too quickly. "Everything's perfect." Tyler got water in his eye, but it's okay now. When they came out of the bathroom, Richard was carrying Tyler wrapped in a towel. The baby was quiet with red little eyes. "See? He's fine now," Richard said, passing the baby to me. "I'm going to make a bottle while you dress him." That night, when I put Tyler's pajamas on, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Small, reddish marks on his back and little arms. They looked like finger marks, as if someone had squeezed him hard. When Richard returned with the bottle, I asked him about the marks. Without hesitating, he replied, "Oh, that." He bumped himself in the tub. "You know how clumsy babies are." I wanted to believe. I swear I wanted to. Richard was a good husband, an attentive dad. Everyone said so. I said so myself. He had never given me any reason to doubt. He had never treated me badly. He had never raised his voice at me, but something didn't fit. The marks looked like fingers, not bumps in the tub. Tyler's crying during the bath was different. It sounded like pain, not a tantrum. And mainly, why did Richard try so hard to lock the door? That night I didn't sleep well. I stayed looking at my baby in the crib next to the bed, watching his peaceful little face while he slept, and an anguish began to grow inside me. What if Richard wasn't who I thought he was? What if behind that mask of a perfect husband there was something dark? The next day, when Richard went to work, I took Tyler and went to visit my brother Frank. He was already a commander in the state police by that time and lived alone in a small apartment downtown. "I need to tell you something," I said as soon as I entered, "but I think you're going to think I'm crazy." Sitting in Frank's living room with Tyler on my lap, I told him everything that had been happening. The long bath hours, the strange cries, the marks I had found. While I spoke, tears ran down my face and my voice trembled. It was as if, by saying those words out loud, I finally admitted to myself the terrible possibility I had been trying to deny. Frank listened in silence, his face getting more and more serious. When I finished, he asked to see the marks on Tyler. Carefully, I took off the baby's clothes and showed him the small purple spots that were still visible on his back and arms. "Betty," he said after a long silence. "I never trusted Richard. I always thought there was something wrong with him, but I never imagined he was capable of this." "Maybe we're wrong," I said, still trying to find an explanation that wouldn't destroy my world. "Maybe it's just, don't fool yourself." Frank interrupted me with a firmness that only increased my fear. "Those aren't accident marks. They are marks of abuse. Believe me, I've seen cases like this before. I want you not to go back home. Stay with Mom and Dad until I resolve the situation." But I was confused, scared. Part of me still wanted to believe in Richard, the man who had been so perfect for all those years, and I also feared what Frank might do. My brother had an inflexible sense of justice and a rage that, once awakened, was hard to control. "Give me time," I begged. "I need to be sure before making any accusation." Frank didn't like it, but he accepted on one condition. "If you notice anything at all, you tell me immediately, and do not leave Richard alone with Tyler." I went back home with a heavy feeling in my chest. how to stop Richard from bathing the baby without raising suspicions, how to observe without being noticed, and mainly, how to deal with the possibility that the man I loved could be hurting our son. That night, when Richard arrived from work, he seemed the same as always. He kissed me on the forehead, asked how my day was, played a little with Tyler. It was hard to look at that gentle man and imagine he could hurt a defenseless child. Our son. I'm going to bathe Tyler, he said like every night. Today I'd like to bathe him, I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. I missed that moment with him. I saw something pass over Richard's face like a fleeting shadow. It wasn't disappointment or annoyance. It was something else, something I had never seen before. But I always bathe him at night, he insisted, his voice still soft but with a new firmness. It's our moment, father and son. I know, but today I want to participate. Can we bathe him together? I suggested, feeling my heart beat strong against my chest. Richard hesitated for a moment, and then accepted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sure. Let's go together then. The bath that night was quick and without incident. Richard was gentle with Tyler, sang to him, did everything with a care that seemed genuine. The baby, however, still cried when his dad touched him, something Richard attributed to a phase. During the following weeks, I insisted on participating in the bath every night. Richard didn't like it. It was visible, but he didn't oppose openly. He just said things like, "You should rest," or, "I thought you were enjoying your free time at night." The marks on Tyler's body were disappearing, and I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Almost, because there were moments, brief instants when I caught Richard looking at Tyler differently. It wasn't the look of love a father has for a son. It was something cold, distant, as if he were looking at an object, not a person. And there were other small things. The way Richard got irritated when the baby cried during the night, even though he never showed that irritation openly. The way he held Tyler sometimes with unnecessary firmness. The way his voice changed, becoming harder when he was alone with me and the baby, without other people present. One day, when Richard was at work, I received a visit from my neighbor, Mrs. Ruth. She was an older lady who lived alone in the house next door and was always very kind to me, helping with advice about the baby. "Betty, dear," she said after a bit of trivial conversation, "excuse the intrusion, but is everything okay with you folks?" I felt my face heat up. "Yes." "Why the question?" She hesitated, twisting the dishcloth she had in her hands. "It's just that sometimes when your husband was bathing the baby, I heard very loud cries. Cries of pain, you know? And once through my bathroom window, I saw when he came out with the little one in his arms, and the child seemed passed out, as if exhausted from crying so much. I felt the blood freeze in my veins." "When was that?" "A few weeks ago, before you started bathing him together." Listening to that, I felt a mix of horror and gratitude. In the 1,970 seconds, people lived by a code of silence. What happened behind closed doors stayed there. For Mrs. Ruth to speak up, she must have been truly terrified for my son. Her courage gave me the validation I desperately needed. I know it took Mrs. Ruth a long time to tell me. But you have to understand, back then, people didn't interfere in marital affairs. Her stepping forward was an act of bravery that gave me the final push I needed. It is a chilling realization that sometimes strangers can see the cracks in our lives before we do. But hold on, because this validation from a neighbor is exactly the spark Betty needs to stop doubting herself and start planning her defense. The confirmation that someone else had also noticed something wrong was like a slap in the face. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't first-time mom paranoia. It was real. That night, when Richard arrived, I was different. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. Every gesture, every word, every smile, everything seemed fake now. A perfect mask hiding something dark underneath. When bath time came, I said I had a headache and that he could go alone. I wanted to see what he would do, if he would insist I participate now that he had gotten used to my presence. But to my surprise, Richard seemed almost relieved. "It's okay. You rest," he said, taking Tyler. "I'll take care of everything." As soon as the bathroom door closed, I ran to our bedroom. Weeks before, I had bought a small battery-operated radio to listen to music while nursing in the middle of the night. The device had a feature my brother Patrick had shown me. If you tuned to the right frequency between two stations, you could pick up sounds from the house like an improvised intercom. You know, my dears, technology back then wasn't as fancy as it is today. Those old baby monitors used very simple signals that could easily get tangled up with radio waves. It was just a little trick my brother Patrick taught me. But in that moment, to me, it felt like the only life raft in a dark, stormy ocean. I turned on the radio, tuned to the frequency I thought would work best, and put my ear close to the device. At first, there was only static, then the sound of water running, and then Richard's voice. But it wasn't the soft and gentle voice I knew. It was a low, angry voice, charged with an emotion I had never heard in him before. Why can't you stay quiet? Why do you have to be so difficult, so irritating? Every word was like a stab. I heard Tyler crying, a cry of pain that broke my heart, and then the unmistakable sound of a smack, and another, and the words became even crueler. Cry, baby, just like your mother. Weak, pathetic. I felt my legs go weak. I had to sit on the bed not to fall. Tears ran down my face, and I had to put my hand over my mouth not to scream. That wasn't the Richard I knew. That wasn't the gentle man I had married. He was a monster. The bath continued for a few more minutes with Richard alternating between moments of suppressed rage and a false sweetness that now sounded even more disturbing. When I heard the water draining, I turned off the radio quickly and hid it under the pillow. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and tried to compose myself. I couldn't confront him now. Not when he was with Tyler, not when I didn't have a plan. I needed to think. I needed to protect myself, and mainly protect my son. Richard came into the room with Tyler in his arms, wrapped in a towel. The baby was quiet with red eyes, exactly as the neighbor had described, exhausted from crying so much. "He's almost asleep," Richard said with that soft voice that now sounded like a terrible lie. "I'm going to put him in the crib." I watched as he put pajamas on Tyler and laid him down to sleep. His gestures were careful, measured. No one seeing him in that moment could imagine the cruelty I had just heard. When Richard left the room to put away the bath things, I approached the crib. Carefully, I examined my son's little body. There were new marks, small, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking for them. Finger marks on his little arms, a red spot on his back. At that moment, something inside me died. Any doubt, any hope that I was wrong, any love I still felt for Richard, everything was replaced by a cold certainty and a fierce determination. My son was being mistreated by his own father, and I wouldn't allow that to continue. But I couldn't just take Tyler and run. Richard would find me, and what would happen then? I couldn't confront him directly, not without being sure we would be protected, and I couldn't ask my parents for help. My mom was sick, and my dad, despite being strong for his age, would be no match for Richard, who was younger and, as I now knew, capable of violence. There was only one person I could fully trust, a person who had promised to protect me, my brother Frank. That night I pretended to sleep next to Richard, feeling my body go rigid every time he turned in bed. The next morning couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the sun rose, I said I was going to visit my mom. Richard didn't question it. I did that regularly. Instead of going to my parents' house, however, I went straight to Frank's apartment. He wasn't there. He had already left for work. I left a simple note. "You were right. I need your help. I'll be at Mom's." I spent the day at my parents' house trying to act normally. My mom noticed I was different, quieter, more tense, but she attributed it to the tiredness of caring for a small baby. "It's like that in the first months, daughter," she said. "It will pass." If only she knew what was really happening. But I couldn't tell. No, not yet, until I had a concrete plan. Frank showed up late in the afternoon. From his expression when he arrived, I knew he had received my note. He asked to talk to me alone, and we went to the boys' old room, which now served as a pantry. "What happened?" he asked as soon as we closed the door. I told him everything, the radio, the cruel words, the new marks. As I spoke, I watched my brother's face transform. The rage was palpable, like a storm about to explode. "I'm going to end him," Frank said through gritted teeth. "No," I replied, grabbing his arm. "I need you as a brother, not in jail for assault. I need help to get out of this situation safely." Frank took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "You're right. We need to be smart. Do you have any proof?" Only what I heard, and the marks on Tyler. But the marks are small. They could be from anything. It's not enough, he said thoughtfully. Richard has a perfect image in the community. No one would believe it without concrete proof. That was when I had the idea. A risky idea that made my stomach turn just thinking about it. But it might be our only chance. What if I get proof? Proof no one could deny. What kind of proof are you thinking of? Frank asked, his eyes fixed on mine. I need to record what happens in that bathroom, I replied, feeling a shiver run down my spine. I need his own voice to convict him. I explained my plan. Patrick, our older brother, had recently bought a high-quality reel-to-reel tape recorder to tape meetings with his clients. It was expensive equipment, bulky but reliable. If I get that recorder from Patrick, I can hide it in the bottom of the linen cabinet before bath time. I'll cover it with towels. That way we'll have concrete audio proof of what Richard does. His words, the slaps, everything. Frank stayed silent for a moment. It's risky. What if Richard finds the recorder? He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what would happen if Richard discovered he was being filmed. His rage, which until then had only been directed at Tyler, could turn against me. It's a risk I need to take, I said with a determination I didn't know I possessed. I can't keep living like this, pretending I don't know what's happening to my son. We agreed I would go back home as if nothing had happened. The next day, Frank would talk to Patrick and get the camera. Then he himself would install it at a time when Richard was at work. Just one more night, he said, squeezing my hand. Hold on, just one more night. I went back home before Richard arrived from work. I fixed dinner, took care of Tyler, and tried to act normally when he arrived. It was the hardest night of my life. Every time Richard touched the baby, I felt like screaming, tearing my son from his arms. But I had to stay calm. I had to pretend nothing had changed. At bath time, I said I was very tired, that it had been a heavy day with Tyler. Richard didn't insist I participate. On the contrary, he seemed almost relieved. You rest, he said, taking the baby. I'll handle him. When the bathroom door closed, I turned on the radio again. The same sounds, the same cruel words, the same cry of pain from my son. Every second was torture. I had to control myself not to invade the bathroom and rip my son from that man's arms. After Richard laid Tyler down to sleep and joined me in the living room, I turned on the TV and pretended to watch the show. He sat next to me, put his arm around my shoulders, and commented on the day at the bank as if it were any ordinary night, as if he hadn't just abused our son. That night, I invented an excuse to sleep in Tyler's room. I said he was more restless, that I thought he might be getting sick, and I wanted to watch him. Richard didn't question it. You're an excellent mom, he said, kissing my forehead. Those words that should have been a compliment sounded like an accusation. If I really were a good mom, I would have noticed what was happening sooner. I spent the night in a chair next to the crib, watching my son sleep. His little face still showed signs of intense crying, but now he was calm. I promised him silently that nothing bad would happen to him again, that I would protect him with my own life if necessary. The next morning, Richard left for work. As always, as soon as he left, Frank showed up with Patrick. My older brother didn't know exactly why we needed the camera, but Frank had told him it was a family emergency, and that was enough. Just be careful with it. It's my livelihood, Patrick said, handing over the equipment. Patrick is worried about his expensive machine, completely unaware that this device is about to become the only weapon Betty has in a war for her child's life. But here is the problem. Hiding a bulky 1,970 seconds tape recorder in a small bathroom is a disaster waiting to happen. And one slip-up could cost them everything. And if you need anything else, just say the word. Frank and I went to the bathroom. He examined the environment, looking for the best place to hide the heavy recorder. Finally, he decided on the bottom shelf of the linen cabinet, behind piles of thick towels, to muffle the mechanical hum, but not the sounds from the room. He tested the microphone sensitivity. It's running, he said, pressing the record button. It has a 90-minute tape. That's more than enough. Now we need a plan for when we have the recording, he said. We can't just confront Richard with this. He might destroy the evidence. He might get violent. We agreed that as soon as we had the recording, I would take Tyler and go straight to the precinct where Frank worked. There he would be waiting with other trusted officers. Richard would be called in under some pretext and confronted with the evidence. Frank made it clear he couldn't be at the house that night. "If I see with my own eyes what he does, I won't be able to control myself," he admitted. "And we need to do this the right way, by the law." I agreed. My brother left, promising to be at the precinct in the evening waiting for me. Patrick also said goodbye, still not fully understanding what was happening, but trusting us. I was left alone with Tyler, the hidden camera, and the longest wait of my life. Every minute felt like an hour. I tried to busy myself with housework. I tried playing with Tyler. I tried doing anything not to look at the clock every 5 minutes. When Richard finally arrived from work, my heart was beating so hard I was afraid he might hear it. I greeted him as always, served dinner. We talked about trivial matters. Me pretending to be the same wife as always, him pretending to be the same gentle husband as always. 2 actors in a macabre play. Bath time arrived and I said I had a headache. Richard took Tyler and went to the bathroom. As soon as I heard the door close, I ran to our bedroom and grabbed the baby monitor radio I had used before. I needed to listen in real time to make sure he didn't go too far, knowing the tape recorder in the bathroom was capturing every terrible sound for the police. I pressed the device to my ear, my hands trembling. At first, there was only the sound of water. Tested the water temperature, placed him gently in the tub, talked to him, smiled. Anyone seeing just that part would think he was an exemplary dad. But then Tyler splashed water, an involuntary baby gesture, and I saw the change. Richard's face transformed. The smile disappeared, replaced by an expression I had never seen before. It was as if another person had taken my husband's place. "Don't do that," he said. The voice low and controlled, but charged with a rage that made me shudder. "How many times do I need to tell you not to do that, Tyler?" Of course, he didn't understand. He was just a baby of a few months. He moved in the water, splashing a few more drops, and that was when it happened. Richard grabbed his little arms with too much force, leaving instant marks on the delicate skin. He shook him, not violently like in movies, but hard enough to scare the baby, to hurt him, all the while speaking cruel words through gritted teeth that I never imagined hearing from him. "You do it on purpose, don't you? Just to irritate me, just like your mother, always testing me, always challenging me." My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a scream. It was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just momentary frustration. It wasn't just inexperience with babies. It was calculated rage. It was deliberate cruelty. Can you imagine that feeling? Realizing that the man sharing your pillow every night is your child's greatest enemy. My heart didn't just break in that moment. It was ground into dust. But you know what? From that dust, a warrior mother was born. Tyler started to cry, a cry of pain and fear that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces, and that only seemed to irritate Richard even more. "Shut up," he hissed, squeezing the baby's arm even harder. "Shut up, or it's going to be worse." It was the hardest moment of my life. Every maternal instinct screamed to run in there, tear my son from those cruel hands, scream, fight, do anything to protect him. But I knew I needed the full recording. I needed irrefutable proof. So I stayed there watching my son be mistreated, feeling every tear of his like a knife in my own chest, promising silently that it would be the last time, that he would never suffer at his father's hands again. This is the most agonizing moment of her life, having to endure her child's pain for a few more minutes to ensure his safety forever. Don't go anywhere, because the most dangerous part of Betty's escape plan is just moments away. The bath continued for a few more minutes, with Richard alternating between moments of rage and periods of false tenderness, as if he were rehearsing for when someone might be watching. Finally, he took Tyler out of the water, wrapped him in a towel, and left the bathroom. I turned off the monitor quickly and ran to our bedroom, pretending to be lying down with a headache. I heard Richard go into the baby's room, put on his pajamas, and lay him in the crib. Then he came to our room. "Tyler is already asleep," Richard said. "How is your head?" "A little better," I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "I think I'm going to take a hot bath. It might help." Richard agreed and went back to the living room, turning on the TV. I seized the opportunity. My legs felt like lead as I walked to the bathroom, every step echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. I locked the door and turned on the faucet, praying the sound of the water would mask the noise of my terror. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely move the stack of towels. When my fingers brushed the cold metal of the recorder, I held my breath. Click. The stop button sounded like a gunshot in the small room. I froze, waiting for Richard's footsteps, waiting for the doorknob to turn. But there was only the sound of the TV from the living room. I shoved the heavy machine into my large knitting bag, burying it under skeins of wool, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't just hiding a tape, I was hiding the evidence that would destroy my life as I knew it. I needed Richard to be completely distracted before making my next move. After about an hour, when I was sure he was absorbed in the TV show, I went to Tyler's room. With the utmost silence possible, I took the sleeping baby, some clothes, the bag with the recorder, and headed for the back door. My heart was beating so fast I thought I might pass out. Every step seemed like an eternity. Every creak of the floor sounded like thunder to my ears. But finally, I managed to leave the house unnoticed. The cool night air hit me like a blessing. I put Tyler in the stroller I had prepared earlier and left in the yard, and started walking as fast as I could without running so as not to attract attention. The streets of Greenwood were almost deserted at that hour. I walked toward downtown, where the precinct was. It was a walk of about 20 minutes, but that night it seemed like an endless journey. At every corner, at every shadow, I imagined Richard appearing, discovering my escape. What would he do? Would he be capable of hurting me too? Of hurting Tyler even more? Those thoughts gave me energy to walk faster, to hurry my pace, even when my legs started to ache. Finally, I spotted the precinct building. The lights were on, and I could see movement inside. Frank was there waiting for me as he had promised. The sight of that place representing safety and justice made tears of relief start running down my face. I pushed the door with one hand, holding Tyler's stroller with the other, and entered. The officer at the front desk looked at me with surprise. It must not have been common to walk in there late at night with a sleeping baby and tears on one's face. "I need to speak with Commander Frank," I said with a broken voice. "I'm his sister." The officer nodded and got up to call my brother. While I waited, I looked at Tyler, still sleeping peacefully. "It's over," I whispered to him. "Mommy isn't going to let anyone hurt you again." Frank appeared immediately, his face tense with worry. Upon seeing me, his body seemed to relax a little. "Did you get it?" he said. Not as a question, but as a statement. I nodded, heaving the heavy knitting bag onto the desk and pulling out the recorder. "It's all here, every word, every sound." He took the machine carefully, as if it were the most precious proof in the world, and at that moment, it really was. "Come," he said, guiding me toward a private room. "You are safe now. Both of you are." As we walked away from the reception, I heard the precinct door open again. I turned instinctively, and my blood froze in my veins. Perhaps he had been watching me from the moment I stepped out the door, or maybe evil just has a way of sensing when its prey is about to slip away. In that moment, I realized that his need to possess was far more terrifying than the love I had once fooled myself into believing existed. Standing at the entrance, with disheveled hair and a face contorted in an expression I had never seen before, was Richard. "Betty," he called out, his voice strangely controlled, despite the fury evident in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" Instinctively, I pulled Tyler's stroller closer to me. Frank immediately placed himself between us, his stance firm, his hand discreetly close to the gun in his holster. "Richard," my brother said with a calm that didn't match the palpable tension in the room. "Good thing you came. We were about to contact you." I saw confusion pass over Richard's face, quickly replaced by his usual mask of cordiality. But now, I could see right through it. I could notice the small signs of falseness that escaped me before. "Contact me? Why?" he asked, taking a step in our direction. Frank made a subtle gesture, and two officers who were at the reception approached, positioning themselves strategically near Richard. "We need to talk about some concerns that have arisen," Frank replied, his voice professional, almost impersonal. "Please, accompany me to the interrogation room." Richard looked at me, looked at the stroller with Tyler, and then at the two officers now at his side. Understanding began to dawn on his face. "What is this about?" he asked, the voice still controlled, but with a tremor of rage. "Betty, what did you tell them?" At that moment, I felt something awaken inside me. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't confusion or denial. It was a strength I didn't know I possessed. The strength of a mother determined to protect her child. "The truth, Richard," I replied, looking him straight in the eyes for the first time. "Only the truth." His face changed, then the mask slipping completely. For a terrible instant, I saw the same look he directed at Tyler during the bath's cold, full of suppressed rage. It was like looking at the face of a stranger. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're confused, tired. Let's go home. We can resolve this," he hissed. He took another step in our direction, but the officers were faster. Each one grabbed one of his arms, not with violence, but with enough firmness to make it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "Richard Miller." "Richard Miller," Frank said formally, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You are being detained for questioning under suspicion of child abuse." Richard scoffed, trying to maintain his composure. "Suspicion? You have nothing but the word of a hysterical woman." "Actually, Richard, we have all the proof we need," Frank replied coldly, lifting the heavy tape recorder onto the table. "It's all right here on this tape." Richard went pale, his eyes fixed on the machine. "That's illegal," he said. "You can't record me without my consent." "That will be discussed with your lawyer," Frank replied dryly. "For now, we're going to talk in the interrogation room." While the officers led Richard away, he looked at me one last time over his shoulder. And that, my dears, is the image that still haunts me, not because he looked like a monster, but because he looked so ordinary. The rage was gone. The charm was gone. There was just a chilling, hollow emptiness. It was as if the Richard I loved never really existed. He was just a costume this stranger had worn to get close to us. In that moment, the grief hit me harder than the fear. I wasn't just mourning the end of my marriage. I was mourning a man who had been nothing but a mirage. But as I clutched Tyler to my chest, feeling his warm, steady heartbeat, I knew that while the husband was a lie, the mother standing there was real, and she was unbreakable. Frank guided me to a different room, more comfortable, with sofas instead of hard chairs. A female officer joined us, introducing herself as Detective Sarah. "I know this is an extremely difficult situation, ma'am," she said gently, "but we need your full statement while the events are still fresh in your memory." I nodded and started telling everything from the beginning. The long baths, the marks I found, the changes in Tyler's behavior, the sounds I heard through the door and over the radio, and finally the decision to install the camera. While I spoke, Tyler woke up in the stroller. I took him in my lap, rocking him gently. He looked around, confused by the unknown environment, but he didn't cry. He seemed to sense that something had changed, that he was safe. "Can I hear the recording?" I asked after finishing my story. Frank and the detective exchanged looks. "I don't think it's good for you to listen to that again," my brother replied. "It's evidence now." "I want to hear it," I insisted. "I need to know for sure that we got him." After some hesitation, they agreed. A technician was called to play the reel. It was painful, hearing those cruel words and the sharp sounds of slaps filling the silence of the interrogation room. "That's enough," Frank said after a few minutes, signaling the technician to stop the tape. "We have everything we need. We have everything we need." Detective Sarah approached, her face showing a mix of compassion and professionalism. "Mrs. Miller, we're going to need a doctor to examine your son to document any injuries. It's standard procedure in these cases." I accepted immediately. Anything that could help keep Richard away from my son. While we waited for the doctor, Frank informed me about the next steps. Richard would be kept in custody during the investigation. A judge would be contacted to issue a restraining order, preventing him from approaching me or Tyler. The legal process would begin with all its complexities. "Where are we going to stay?" I asked, suddenly aware I couldn't go back home. Not to the house I shared with Richard, where every corner now held painful memories. "You can stay with me for now," Frank replied. "I have enough room, and we'll figure it out later. The important thing is you're safe now." The doctor arrived and examined Tyler gently, documenting every mark, every piece of evidence of what he had suffered. The baby, surprisingly, didn't cry during the exam. It was as if he sensed that was necessary, that it was part of his path to safety. It was almost dawn when we finally left the precinct. Frank took us to his apartment, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I slept without fear. Tyler was in a makeshift crib next to my bed, and Frank stood guard in the living room like the protector he always was. The next morning I woke up with sunlight coming through the window. For a moment I was disoriented, not knowing where I was. Then the events of the previous night came back like a wave, and I looked immediately to the side where Tyler was still sleeping peacefully. I got up and went to the kitchen, where Frank was already making coffee. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept much, but smiled when he saw me. "How are you?" he asked, pouring a cup of coffee for me. "I don't know," I replied honestly. Relieved, scared, guilty, all at the same time. Guilty? Why? For not realizing sooner, for not protecting my son from the start, for believing the lie that was Richard. Frank put his hand on mine, his touch gentle but firm. "Don't do that to yourself, Betty. You had no way of knowing. Richard fooled everyone, not just you. And when you discovered the truth, you acted. That's what matters." His words helped, but the guilt didn't disappear completely. I thought it never would. It would be a weight I would carry forever, a constant reminder to always be alert, to always protect those I love. If there is a mother out there listening to this and blaming herself just like I did, please, I beg you stop. The guilty one is the person who inflicted the wound, not the one trying to heal it. Do not let guilt eat away at the strength you need to keep moving forward. "And now?" I asked. "Now the hard part begins," Frank replied. "The legal process can be long. There will be depositions, hearings, maybe a trial. But we are on the side of truth, and we have solid evidence. Richard isn't going to escape what he did." That morning, I made the decision that would change the course of my life and Tyler's life. We wouldn't go back to Greenwood, at least not to live. There were too many memories there, too much pain. We needed a fresh start in a place where no one knew us, where we could rebuild our lives far from Richard's shadow. Frank helped me find a small apartment in Indianapolis, not very far from where he was stationed at the time. In the following months, while the case against Richard followed its slow course in the courts, we started our new life. I got a job at a fabric store similar to where I worked before, and slowly, very slowly, we began to heal our wounds. The legal process was exactly as Frank predicted. Long, draining, sometimes humiliating. I had to relive every painful moment, answer invasive questions, face Richard's gaze across the courtroom. But the evidence was irrefutable. The recording left no doubts about what he had done. Richard was convicted, although the sentence was lighter than I expected. He didn't go to prison for a long time. The judicial system of that time didn't treat child abuse with the seriousness it deserved, but it was enough to guarantee he stayed away from us. And it was only then, when it was all over, that I fully understood the truth. Richard was never good to me out of love. He never attacked me not because he respected me, but because he was terrified of what my brother, the commander, would do to him if he dared. He was a coward and took out all his evil on the only defenseless being in the house. There is a profound shift in power when you realize the monster you feared was actually just a coward terrified of a fair fight. This realization is Betty's true freedom. But don't think the story ends here. Rebuilding a life from scratch comes with its own ghosts, and Tyler still bears invisible scars that will take more than just time to heal. My son. This revelation was bitter, but also liberating. It allowed me to finally cut the last threads of feeling that still tied me to that man and move forward with my son, with our new life. And so began our long journey of healing in Indianapolis, far from the shadows of the past, but always protected by the man who had made a promise to a scared little girl many years before. I won't lie to you and say it was easy. Freedom has a taste, but in the beginning, it tasted like fear. For the first year in that small apartment, I checked the locks 3 times a night. If the wind made the floorboards creak, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for a baby who was already safe. I had to learn who Betty was without Richard. I had to learn that silence didn't mean danger, it meant peace. There were nights I sat on the floor and cried until I had no tears left, wondering if I was strong enough to raise a son alone. But every morning, I'd wash my face, brew my coffee, and look at Tyler. And I realized that peace wasn't something you found. It was something you fought for, day by day, cup of coffee by cup of coffee. My brother Frank, the silent protector who kept his word until the end. The first months in Indianapolis were hard. Tyler, still so small, seemed to carry the marks of what he had lived. He woke up crying during the night. He flinched when any man got near him and took a good while to feel comfortable in the tub again. Every reaction of his was a stab in my heart, a constant reminder that I hadn't protected him as I should have. We lived in a small apartment, just a bedroom and living room, but it was our refuge. The yellowed walls, the wooden floor that creaked, the window that didn't close right when it rained, all that, as simple as it was, represented our freedom, our new beginning. Frank visited us whenever he could. He brought gifts for Tyler, helped with expenses when money was tight, and gave me the emotional support I needed so much. Without him, I don't know if we would have managed to start over. "One day at a time, Betty," he told me when he saw me discouraged. "You are stronger than you think." Richard, serving his short sentence, tried to make contact a few times. Letters, messages through mutual acquaintances, always with the same speech that he was sorry, that he had changed, that he deserved a second chance. I never replied. To me, he had died the moment I saw that recording. Time passed. Tyler started to walk, to talk, to develop his personality. He was a sweet, sensitive boy with a smile that lit up the room. Sometimes, when I watched him playing, it was hard to believe what had happened, how close we were to losing everything. The change in our lives didn't come suddenly like a lightning bolt, but gradually like the sun rising after a long, dark night. It was small changes, small victories that little by little built our new reality. The first big step was when I got a promotion at the fabric store where I worked. From a simple clerk, I went to managing the sewing and embroidery department. The better salary allowed us to move to a larger apartment in a nicer neighborhood of Indianapolis. Tyler got his own room decorated with cars and stars on the ceiling. Simple things, but for us, they meant so much. I started taking a night course in business administration at the city's technical college. Tyler stayed with a neighbor, Mrs. Margaret, a widow who treated him like a grandson. Studying after so many years wasn't easy, but every page turned, every exam completed, was a step away from the past toward a future I was building with my own hands. It was during that course that I met Edward, an accounting professor. He was a widower, a few years older than me, with a calm and patient manner that soon captivated Tyler. Our friendship started slowly with conversations after class, occasional coffees to discuss projects. I took a long time to trust, to allow any man to get close to me or my son again. One day, Edward invited me to dinner. I hesitated for days before finally accepting. I didn't know if I was ready for that, if I ever would be. Before the date, I went to visit Frank. "What do you think?" I asked nervously. "Am I making a mistake?" My brother thought for a moment. "I can't answer that for you, Betty, but I can say that Edward seems like a decent man and you deserve to be happy." "I'm afraid," I confessed. "Not for me, but for Tyler. What if I'm wrong again? What if I don't know how to judge a man's character?" Frank took my hands in his. "You're not the same person you were when you met Richard. Now you know what to look for. You know when something isn't right. Besides," he added with a half smile, "I checked Edward's record. It's clean." That made me laugh, and the laughter was like a relief after so much tension. Of course, Frank would have investigated Edward. It was his nature to protect, to guarantee we were safe. The dinner happened at a small restaurant in downtown Indianapolis. It was a pleasant evening, without pressures or expectations. Edward was a good listener. He had a subtle sense of humor and didn't ask invasive questions about my past. When he dropped me home, he limited himself to a kiss on the cheek and the hope of seeing us again. Our relationship grew slowly with respect for my boundaries and Tyler's. Edward never tried to replace the father figure. He knew that was delicate territory. Instead, he built his own relationship with my son based on mutual trust and shared interests. He helped him with school homework, taught him to play chess, took him fishing at the river on weekends. Frank, always vigilant, watched that approach with attentive eyes, but even he ended up surrendering to Edward's genuine kindness. "I think you got it right this time," he told me after a family BBQ where Edward had participated. The definitive turning point came 2 years after meeting Edward. Richard had served his sentence and was free. I heard from acquaintances that he had returned to Greenwood and was trying to resume his life. This news left me anxious, afraid he might try to find us, approach Tyler. One night, Edward noticed my restlessness. We were sitting on the balcony of the apartment. Tyler was already sleeping. "What's happening, Betty?" he asked. You seem distant lately. I hesitated. I had never told him the whole story, just fragments. Enough for him to understand I was separated and there were problems in the past. Edward never pressured for more details, respecting my silence. But that night, something inside me said it was time to share everything. And so I did. I told him about Richard, about the baths, about the marks on Tyler's body. I told him about the camera, about the night escape to the precinct, about the court case. While I spoke, tears ran freely down my face. But there was also a strange relief in sharing that burden. Edward listened in silence, his face going through various emotions: shock, rage, sadness. When I finished, he just took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "It must have been very hard." There was no judgment in his voice. There was no excessive pity or empty promises that everything would be okay. Just understanding and respect for what we had been through, Tyler and I. "I'm worried," I confessed. "Now that he's free, I'm afraid he might try to find us." Edward stayed silent for a moment, as if carefully considering his next words. "Betty," he said finally, "you aren't alone in this. I am here, your brother is here, and there are legal measures we can take to ensure your safety and Tyler's." The next morning we went together to a lawyer. With his help, we got a permanent restraining order against Richard. He couldn't get near us, contact us in any way, or even frequent the same places we used to go. It was also in that period that Edward gave me an invitation that would change our lives once again. "I'm thinking of opening my own accounting firm," he said, "and I'd like you to be my partner." I was surprised. "But I haven't even finished the course yet." "You have a natural talent for administration, Betty, and you have practical experience managing the department at the store. The diploma will come, but your knowledge is already there." It was a scary and exciting proposal at the same time. It meant leaving the secure job at the store, risking our savings on a new business, trusting it would work out. But it also meant independence, growth, the opportunity to build something of our own. I talked to Frank, who had been promoted to major and now worked in a special unit of the state police in Indianapolis. He supported me fully. "It's going to be good for you, Betty, and for Tyler too, to see his mom building something from scratch." And so we took one more step in our journey of rebuilding. The office started small, in a rented room downtown. Edward took care of the technical accounting part while I managed the day-to-day, dealt with clients, organized processes. It was hard work. There were difficult days, nights of worry with bills to pay, moments of doubt, but there were also victories. Every new client, every balance sheet closed successfully, every compliment received was a confirmation that we were on the right path. Tyler, now 7 years old, watched everything with curious eyes. Sometimes after school, he came to the office and did his homework at a little table we placed especially for him. He liked helping with small tasks, stapling documents, organizing folders, answering the phone occasionally. He was a smart boy, responsible beyond his age, and a constant source of pride. A year after opening the office, Edward asked me to marry him. It was a simple proposal during a picnic in the park, with Tyler playing ball nearby. There was no expensive ring or grand gestures, just sincere words about building a life together. Before answering, I talked to Tyler. He had the right to have an opinion, to express his feelings about having a new dad. "What do you think of Uncle Edward?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. Tyler thought for a moment with that seriousness that sometimes surprised me in someone so young. "He's cool," he replied finally. "He never yells, not even when I make a mistake in chess. And he makes you laugh, Mom." Those simple words, coming from a child who had seen the worst side of fatherhood, were the greatest endorsement I could receive. I accepted Edward's proposal, and we got married in a small ceremony, just with family and close friends. Frank was our best man, and Tyler carried the rings with immense pride. Our life began to take shape, to gain solidity. The office prospered. We expanded to a larger space. We hired assistants. We bought a house in a residential neighborhood of Indianapolis with a yard where Tyler could play and a space for a garden that soon became my passion. It was in that house that we received the news that would definitively close a chapter of our past. Richard had moved to Florida to work in a bank there. He was far away. He no longer represented a threat. We could finally breathe without the constant weight of fear. The complete liberation, however, came from an unexpected place. Tyler, now 10 years old, started asking questions about his biological father. They were natural questions for a child of that age, but they filled me with anxiety. How to explain the truth without traumatizing him again. How to talk about the man who had hurt him when he was just a defenseless baby. Frank, always my safe harbor in emotional storms, advised me, be honest, but age-appropriate. He has the right to know, Betty, and it's better coming from you than from someone else. With the help of a child psychologist, I approached the subject gradually. I didn't go into graphic details, but I made it clear that his biological dad had hurt him when he was a baby, and that's why he was no longer part of our lives. Tyler absorbed the information with surprising maturity. He asked questions, expressed confusion and sadness, but also a precocious understanding. Was that why we moved here? He asked. Yes, I replied, to start over in a safe place. He stayed silent for a moment, thoughtful. Uncle Frank helped, right? That's why he's always around. Yes, my son, your Uncle Frank was our protector. He always kept the promise he made me when we were kids, that he would never let anything bad happen to me. Tyler nodded as if fitting pieces of a puzzle together. And Edward, he's different, isn't he? He's never going to hurt me. Never, I affirmed with the certainty that only time and living together can give. He loves you like a son. That conversation, difficult as it was, brought a new layer of healing to our lives. It was as if by bringing the past to light, we had finally removed its power over us. Tyler started calling Edward Dad, first with hesitation, then with increasing naturalness. And Edward, with tears in his eyes the first time he heard it, hugged him with all the love a father can have. They say blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. In that single embrace, the shadow of the biological father is finally erased, proving that a real dad isn't the one who shares your DNA, but the one who heals your heart. Stay with us, because Betty's journey has one final, beautiful chapter that shows exactly what victory looks like after the storm. Our story of overcoming wasn't built in a single dramatic moment, but in thousands of brave little steps over the years. It was in the decision to install a camera that distant night, yes, but also in every morning I got up, took care of my son, and kept going. It was in the unshakable support of my brother, in Edward's patient kindness, in Tyler's incredible resilience. And while I watched our family gathered around the dining table, Tyler recounting animatedly about a school project, Edward listening with genuine attention, myself participating with a freedom I once thought I would never have again, I knew the change was complete. We were no longer defined by what we had survived, but by what we had built from the ruins. The path from victim to survivor, and from survivor to builder of a new life, was long and often painful. But every step was worth it, because it brought us here to the peace we finally found, to the family we created, to the love we learned to trust again. Today, at 73, my life here is peaceful. Edward passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. It was a painful loss after almost 4 decades of a happy marriage, but I find comfort in the home we built. Tyler is now 49, living in Chicago with his wife Julia and the kids. He became a lawyer dedicated to defending vulnerable children, turning his own scars into a shield for others. Seeing him as a loving, gentle father to Mason and Harper is the greatest victory of my life. We broke the cycle, my dears. The darkness stopped with us. My days have a simple and flavorful routine. I wake up early, brew my coffee, and go to the porch to watch the day break. Then I take care of the garden. I have special pride in my lilies and my sunflowers that stay turned toward the sun like little worshippers of light. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I go to the crafts group at the neighborhood church, where we make items for charity bazaars. It was there that I resumed knitting, a skill I learned with my mom and that now gives me so much pleasure and tranquility. In the afternoons, when I'm not knitting to sell at the fair or to give to someone, I like to cook. I make sweets and cakes using my mom's recipes, some so old they are yellowed with time. The smell of cinnamon and cloves taking over the house brings me back to my childhood in Greenwood, to the good moments before everything that happened. Frank, my dear brother and protector, retired from the state police as a colonel. He lives just a few blocks from here and visits me almost daily. At 77, he still maintains the erect posture and attentive gaze of a military man, but his eyes have become softer over time. He never married, He says his mission in life was to take care of his little sister and his nephew, and that occupied his whole heart. I don't fully believe it. Of course, I think the work in the state police, especially after he transferred to a unit dealing with crimes against children, absorbed so much of him that there was no room left to build his own family. But he never complains. He says he is happy with the choices he made, with the impact he had on the lives of so many families throughout his career. When Frank comes to visit me, we sit on the porch, drink coffee, and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we remember our childhood, Mom and Dad, the brothers, the simple games of that time. We laugh at the pranks we pulled, at the times he defended me from bullies at school. Other times we talk about the present, the grandkids, the garden, the neighborhood news, and rarely, very rarely, we talk about those difficult days we faced together. Richard became a distant ghost in our lives. We learned many years ago that he remarried in Florida. He had other children. I don't know if he changed, if he found any redemption. It's not something that worries me anymore. I learned that I can't control the actions of others, only mine. And I chose to move forward without the weight of hate or bitterness. The marks of that time are still in me. Sure, there are moments when a sudden noise startles me, when a door slamming hard makes me jump. Sometimes, when I see on TV cases of mistreated children, I feel that old pain resurface, but I don't let those marks define me or limit my capacity to feel joy. One of the greatest blessings of recent years was reconnecting with the community. For a long time after the events with Richard, I lived isolated, afraid to trust, to open up to new friendships. But little by little, especially after the grandkids were born, and I moved to this house, I started getting more involved with the neighbors, with the church group, with the ladies at the fair where I sell my knitting. Mrs. Linda, my 1-year-old neighbor, became a dear friend. She lives alone like me. We exchange dishes over the fence that separates our houses. She makes meatloaf that is a delight, and I reciprocate with my apple pie. Sunday afternoons, when neither of us has family visiting, we play cards on my porch, betting pennies we never collect from each other. Mr. Carl, a widowed gentleman of 75 who sells vegetables at the market, always sets aside the best carrots and beets for me. "For the lady to make that soup that feeds the soul," he says with a gentle smile. It's not romance. We are just two seniors who found comfort in friendship, in the mutual care that people our age understand so well. The neighborhood kids like to stop by my house after school to get homemade cookies. They sit on the porch steps, tell me about their day, about the teachers and classmates. I listen to every story with attention, knowing how important it is for a child to feel their voice matters, that someone is interested in what they have to say. Looking back, I see how long the journey was that brought me here. From the dreaming girl in Greenwood to the quiet grandma in Indianapolis, I went through dark valleys and bright mountains. I knew the worst of human cruelty, but also the purest kindness. I learned that life gives us no guarantees, only possibilities, and it's up to us to choose what to do with them. If there is a lesson I would like to leave for those listening, it is that it is never too late to start over. I had to reinvent my life at 24 as a single mom of a traumatized baby in a new city, without money or clear prospects. It was scary, and many times I thought I wouldn't make it. But every small step, every small victory, took me a little further from the abyss. Today, when I wake up and see the birds in the garden I planted with my own hands, when I receive the tight hug of my grandkids, when I smell the pie baking in the oven, I know it was worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, everything was worth it to get here. Life taught me that our story is not defined by the moments we fell, but by how we got up afterward. That the most powerful force is not the one that destroys, but the one that rebuilds. And that even in the darkest nights, there is always a light. Sometimes it's just a small flame of hope inside us, but if we protect and feed it, it can grow and illuminate not only our path, but also that of others who need to find a way out of the darkness. That was how I survived. That was how I won. And that is how I live today. Grateful for every morning, for every cup of coffee on the porch, for every flower that blooms in my garden. Grateful for having had the opportunity to see my son grow in safety, to know my grandkids, to experience true and generous love with Edward, and mainly grateful for having learned that no matter how broken we are, it is always possible to pick up the pieces and build something new and beautiful with them. My dears, who accompanied me this far, I shared with you one of the most difficult stories of my life, showing scars that I often hide even from myself. If you are living in an abusive situation, know that you are not alone. It may seem like no one will believe that there is no way out. I felt that way too. But there are people willing to help. There are paths to freedom. Abuse is never the victim's fault. The only responsible person is the abuser. The signs are often subtle, and the abuser works actively to hide them. Richard maintained a perfect public image. Only in the most private moments was his true nature revealed. When we suspect something is wrong, we try to deny it, because the truth is too painful. But there comes a moment when we can't run anymore. For me, it was when I heard those sounds on the radio and saw the marks on my son's body. If you are looking for courage, you don't need to do everything at once. Small steps are important. Saving money little by little, making a plan, seeking support. When I ran away that night with my baby, I had only the essentials and the certainty that my brother would be there. It was enough to start. Don't underestimate the power of a single reliable ally. For me, it was Frank. For you, it can be a relative, friend, neighbor, or professional. If you don't have that close support, there are organizations in every country dedicated to helping victims of abuse. The path of recovery isn't linear. There are ups and downs, good days and bad. Healing comes in many forms. For me, it came through work, raising my son, Edward's love, and the community I built. It also came by breaking the silence and sharing my story. Today, at 73, I am stronger than the trauma I suffered. I chose not to let it define my life. When I see Tyler with his own children, treating them with love and respect, I know we broke the cycle of abuse. This is our greatest victory. If you have lived something similar, know, it is possible to rebuild, no matter how broken you feel. It won't be easy or quick, but it is possible. From the scared girl in Greenwood to the serene grandma in Indianapolis, I survived storms I thought would destroy me. And if you know someone who might be suffering abuse, be present. Sometimes all a person needs is someone who believes in them. Abuse thrives in silence. When we break that silence, we undo its power over us. Now, look at this framed photo on my mantelpiece, right next to that old black and white one. It captures another young family, Tyler, his wife, and my grandchildren. But the difference is in the soul of the image. History has repeated itself, my dears, but this time, the love is real. Tyler holds his children not with a grip of control, but with an embrace of freedom. Mason has inherited his great-uncle Frank's protective gaze, and Harper carries the joyful spirit I fought so hard to reclaim. The cycle of pain is finally broken, replaced by a circle of light. My heart is full, and my coffee has never tasted sweeter. If you believe in the power of new beginnings, please subscribe and join our family's journey.